Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks traveling across the country Saturday night on the road against Penn State. And let's just get this one straight right off the bat. Saturday night, whiteout in Beaver Stadium. Though we've been really lucky to experience a lot of really cool college football environments. There is not one that's close to the whiteout at Penn State during a night game. And what I think fascinates most of us about this game is we're looking at two national championship contenders. You make no mistake about it. But they're two teams that probably haven't really been tested up until this point. We're going to figure out a lot about both of these football teams Saturday night. And before we even get into it, I would invite Oregon fans, Penn State fans, man, let it rip in the comment section. There are so many different takes that you can have on this matchup. Let it rip. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, I think there is, to me, an obvious starting point in terms of breaking down this game, and that is this Penn State rushing attack that is behind a dominant offensive line with two of the most talented running backs in the country, with Coach K absolutely dialing it up in the run game against an Oregon defense that, Dill, Oregon has looked so damn good to start 2025. But if you ask the Oregon fans that follow this football team closely and say, hey, what's your biggest concern about Oregon in the 2025 year? Most of them will probably respond with, hey, are we good enough and are we deep enough in the middle of that defensive line? Like Amari Washington's been awesome for Oregon to start the year. Barry Alexander's been really damn solid. You look at the 2 and 3D, the guys that get rotated in the middle of that defensive line, probably leaves a little bit to be desired. You know, Tyone Gray, Terrence Green. My biggest question is, can Penn State do what they want running the football and get to that Oregon depth? Because, Dill, that's kind of what you saw in the Big Ten championship game 12 months ago, where like Oregon didn't have a ton of depth. Their starters had to play a lot of football, and because of that, Penn State was able to manufacture a lot of success. When you look at that matchup, what are your biggest takes heading into this one?
And then that is where I do think Oregon's gotten better in certain areas, especially their safeties can play the run, and probably also what their linebackers are playing like. Because last year,
Yeah, way
I
better.
think you had a couple issues. One, you kind of had a front four for that Oregon team, but your two deep was non-existent. And you saw like Derek Harmon and Caldwell, they played pretty much the whole game,
Yep.
and you could pretty see clearly them getting worn down. To me, again, if Penn State can sustain drives and get to this depth, I do think that's going to be a huge problem. I do think some of the ancillary pieces around this Oregon front, if you will, are much better and maybe more capable of supporting that rushing attack than maybe they were last year.
So here's, to me, the next biggest storyline. I would be stunned if Dan Lanning does not drop a safety into the box. And that's a really big storyline because you look at Dylan Tiemann for Oregon, and you look at a guy like Aaron Flowers, and you look at a guy like Peyton Woodyard and say, hey, there ain't many better safeties in the country coming up and fitting the run than Oregon has in the back end. My question is, all right, if Oregon decides to roll a safety into the box and say, hey, we're going to add a hat to the box, we're going to try to deal with this Penn State rushing attack, does Penn State have the ability to win vertically down the field and punish Oregon vertically down the field in the passing attack? That's probably the biggest question mark about Penn State the whole season long. It's like, this team can win a national championship, but you got to show us that these wide receivers can win vertically down the field when these teams try to stop the rushing attack. And I look at it and say, there hasn't been a ton of film this year that points to a lot of confidence, right? You look at Drew and say he's 2 of 8 on throws 20 plus yards down the field. We are not positive that these new wide receivers coming into the program are the answer. If Penn State wants to win this football game, I firmly believe that these wide receivers need to be the answer. How do you look at these Oregon cornerbacks going up against these Penn State wide receivers?
And that probably is the fundamental problem for Penn State, is I think Oregon's cornerbacks are quite a bit improved from what they were last year. Like last year, you had small, kind of slower cornerbacks. Like, not to be like too critical of what they were trotting out there, but you certainly have a different body type in this room. And that's not just in the corner room. That's in the safety room. That's at the nickel spot. Because to me, I think what really allowed Penn State to churn it up last year in the Big Ten championship game was the fact that they could sustain drives by getting Tyler Warren involved in being able to sustain drives, hit those 3rd and longs, because you had a guy that Oregon didn't really have an answer for. I think athletically, Oregon has more answers. And like Luke Reynolds looks like he might be a really good player for this Penn State team, and Drew certainly feels like he is utilizing him as that safety valve. But I do look like, bigger, faster, more athletic safeties, especially, that I do think maybe can match up a little bit better with a guy like Luke Reynolds. And that's where, like, well, can you win on the boundary in one-on-one spots? I'm not sure you can.
I mean, like, if you owe Brandon Finney, and that's probably the matchup you're looking at. And Brandon Finney's been freaking awesome for Oregon early. He's still a true freshman, and this is by far the most hostile environment this kid will have played in. Can your wide receivers take advantage of an inexperienced freshman that's in a really big football game? That's another question you're asking about as well. Dill, how about this one? Oregon creating negative plays? Because there's one thing you love about Oregon. Like when you have a guy like Mateo and you have a guy like Tatum and you have a guy like Amari Washington on the inside, when you have the linebackers, the way Oregon's linebackers are playing, can you create some more negative plays, put Penn State behind the chains a little bit, force Drew to drop back and throw the football from the pocket? Because you look at Penn State and say, what makes that passing attack pretty damn good is they're always on schedule and they can utilize play action. The whole playbook's available. If Oregon can create some negative plays in these early downs, forcing Penn State into second and third and longs where they have to drop back and pass, that's probably another advantage that Oregon has. But you got to create those negative plays first, which is damn hard to do against this Penn State offense.
Because we've seen like Oregon, especially like at the linebacker spot at times, like be able to make those against lesser competition. That's like, is Bryce Betcher going to emerge as that guy that when they play the top end teams that they're going to see, is he going to play like, I almost want to say a vintage Georgia linebacker?
Just how good are these Oregon linebackers, right?
Because I feel like my eyeballs are telling me they've taken a step. But again, that's where like we're doing so much projecting in this game because we just don't really know. And that's both ways. Like I'm thinking Luke Reynolds is really good. When he has to deal with a guy like Kingston Lopa, is he going to be able to get off of a 6'2" safety or 6'4"? I don't know, 6'2", 6'4" safety.
He's 6'4".
Really run.
Yeah, no, that is the fun part about this game is there's a decent amount of projection on both sides of things. All right, let's flip it here. I think there's one obvious storyline when you're looking at this Oregon offense versus this Penn State defense. And by the way, there were a lot of national media members that were questioning this Penn State defense. Just how good can this Penn State defense be? You have to replace your defensive coordinator, and you replace him with Jim Knowles, who's one of the best in the game. Then you lose a guy like Abdul Carter. Can Penn State's defense have the same bite that they had last year? We're through 3 games. They haven't necessarily been tested by an elite offense like Oregon, but the eyeball test is telling us, hey, they're going to be just fine on defense. My biggest question mark is, what does Dante Moore look like, not only in a hostile environment like this, but more importantly than that, what does Dante Moore look like when it's not perfect? Because Dante Moore's looked freaking awesome to start 2025. Ain't no question about that. It's been really clean. They've been able to run the football whenever they want. They've kept them really, really clean in pass protection. I'm looking at Penn State and say, hey, Dill, Danny Devin Sutton, we knew was that guy. Zariah Fisher is emerging as that guy. They got a true freshman in Chaz Coleman who's been awesome to start the year. And then I'm looking at these Oregon tackles saying they've been really good to start, but Isaiah World on the left side and Alex Harkey on the right side, are they guys that can go on the road in this kind of environment with the crowd noise that's going to be there? Say, can you guys go play the way you've played to start the year? That's certainly a question that I think a lot of Oregon fans have going on the road to this one.
Because the athleticism is going to be the real issue. It's like we just haven't seen a defensive line be able to play with the amount of activity and the athleticism and the stunts that this Penn State team can run. Because like what's made them so dangerous in the past is they've just, again, maybe on the smaller side, maybe if you could get after them a little bit in the run, you could find some holes. But they're so good at creating negative plays. They're so active. And you also have again, not just from the talent of what this Oregon team has, it's very new. Like it's very opposite of what Penn State's offensive line is, which all homegrown talent, longer term transfer guys, Ben played a lot of snaps together. This Oregon team, like they haven't been exposed, and I think they've played really clean up front, but they also haven't played a defense that can really test them. So again, it's not just like are the one-on-one matchups, is Penn State can be able to win their share of them, but can this Oregon offensive line communicate the way that like really well-polished offensive lines or well-seasoned offensive lines, maybe I'd say.
And I think I will say this, I think having Poncho as your starting center is huge. Like, I think he is the glue for this Oregon offensive line. But I will say this, and I'm happy that you pointed this out. Jim Knowles has had 2 weeks to prepare for this one. And he's throwing in a lot of different wrinkles and a lot of different looks. And it's going to be really loud. And it's hard to get your offensive line in the
You're
right.
We haven't seen Dante Moore in tough spots that much.
Yeah.
Like, most of it's been pretty good. And like, again, even in his few moments where he's had his shots to make things happen, he's certainly been able to do it. But like, again, I don't want to say Oregon's going to be living in those spots, but Penn State's going to put you in their share.
Yeah, it's going. I mean, like, here's the thing with Dante Moore. Go look at his numbers. His numbers have been awesome, but the numbers drop off when he's not working off play action. And the numbers drop off when he is under pressure. How much does Penn State get him under pressure? How well can Penn State stop the run and kind of take away the play action? Those are all storylines that you're looking for with this Oregon offense. And then, Dill, the other side of it is these Oregon pass catchers that have looked really, really good. You talk about a guy like DeCorian Moore as a freshman, or Malik Benson, Kenyon Sadiq, Gary Bryant going up against a really, really good secondary that can be sticky in coverage. Your biggest question for Oregon heading into the season was, does Oregon have good enough pass catchers on the outside? They have looked the part so far. Can they look the part on the road against a very good Penn State secondary that doesn't have many holes? Like, you look at their boundary guys, you look at the nickel, you look at the safeties and say, hey, there's not really a matchup that you're saying, hey, that's the weak link. So you just need these pass catchers to go on and create some separation and win. Can they do that? It's probably another storyline that you're not all that sure about.
Well, and one like kind of sneaky one, and we haven't seen it yet, but like, Jim Knowles early in his Ohio State career did give up some big ones. Dante Moore, he unleashes a different version of this Oregon team because he throws a much better deep ball and a much more dangerous deep ball than Dylan Gabriel. I do wonder, like, again, it's a really aggressive defense. It's a complicated defense that Jim Knowles wants to run. It is what is it going to be, game 3 for them, or game 4 for this defense? Like, we saw some early breaks in that Ohio State, as much as they were a dominant unit, and he built an absolute warhorse of a defense by the time he was done there. Early on in his career, he gave up some big plays in some big games. Dante Moore, we talked about all year. Can he be that guy to like unlock a new version in a more explosive version of this Oregon?
I'm happy you brought that up, because I do think that's a really big storyline, kind of similar to how we saw Texas A&M and Notre Dame play out a couple of weeks ago. It's like, all right, is Oregon just going to move the ball at will against this Penn State defense? I don't know. Like, that would be disrespectful to the Penn State's defense, right? It's a really good unit. Can you find those game-changing plays? And like you said, Dante Moore attacking the boundary and attacking vertically, it kind of unlocks an explosive element to this Oregon offense that we didn't totally have last year. That's another one, right? You might not be super efficient, right? And you might have to punt a little bit more than Oregon's had to punt. But can you find those game-changing plays that put 7 on the board? Certainly a storyline. Let's get into the pick, Dill. Oregon on the road, 3.5-point dogs. Who are you taking?
I'm going to take Penn State. I was looking, and I've been a Penn State skeptic, I'll be honest.
You have been. I'm surprised.
I do think I'm a little more concerned about this interior defensive line depth. And Drew, I will say, as much as like the numbers aren't popping off from the explosiveness, and I'm not sure this is an explosive offense. I probably don't buy the transfer portal wideouts quite the same. If they can keep themselves on schedule, they have 2 guys potentially who are really effective in those chain moving kind of roles. And that's probably Luke Reynolds. I certainly think Luke Reynolds. And then obviously Trebor Pena. And I do feel like there's a solid connection. We've seen some like well-timed, well-run routes, things that we didn't always see from the Penn State wideouts. I think they can keep themselves on the field and get after that depth. I think that's going to be a huge problem for the
so
give me the Lions.
I get that. Like, I get it. You don't bet against Penn State in these whiteout games. I'm just going to have to follow my eyeballs, though. Follow my eyeballs and follow my gut. And my eyeballs and gut have been telling me that Oregon's a better team, right? And I'm just not sold that Drew has that ability to beat Oregon vertically down the field. And look, Dill, I think Oregon, if they want to stop the run, I think they will be able to stop the run. Then it puts Drew in that position where you got to go win vertically down the field. And I just have not seen that yet from Penn State. And we said this in the beginning of the year. Penn State wants to win these games. They have to have that ability. And I don't think they do, especially against these Oregon cornerbacks that can run and make plays with the football in the air.
See, I will push back. I don't know that they need to be wildly vertically explosive, but they do need some sort of passing attack where they can get to. And I do look, if they can just avoid bad situations like 3rd and long, and that's going to be a tall task because you're right. This Oregon team can certainly create some negatives. They do have 2 guys who I do have some level of confidence in, just like they had last year. Like, I'm kind of with you. I don't see the verticality necessarily, and maybe that really heavy box kind of look Oregon can hit them with will be a problem.
Yep.
But I feel like this game played out last year, and I don't know. I have probably slightly less confidence in this Oregon depth in their defense.
Yeah, I'm not. That definitely ain't disagreeing with that. And Dill, I'll say this: if you have a super confident pick, I think you're out of your mind, right? Like, this is a super hard game to have a ton of confidence one way or the other. I'm going with my gut and I'm going with my eyeballs. You're kind of going with the matchups, quite frankly, which I understand.
I'm going with I don't know. Is Drew gonna make it happen? Like, I feel like
you're going with Drew making it happen.
Like there's been a level of composure I've seen from him playing where, again, I know he hasn't been lighting the world on fire. I just don't think it's a wildly explosive offense, but I do like at moments he's been able to hit those sort of plays, sit in the pocket, not freak out. And again, he hasn't played a great team.
I'm not gonna lie, that's a little bit of the reason why I'm going with Oregon here. It's like Drew hasn't really shown me that he can make it happen against in these kind of moments. I'm not sure if Dante Moore hasn't exactly either because he hasn't really been in these moments. I'm going with my gut.
We've had a lot of them for Drew. 2nd year with Koldalnicki.
All right. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.